Read Into It with Robin, a virtual book club.
It's book club time, and this week we are going to be talking about Shadow Daughter, which is a memoir of estrangement by Harriet Brown. And this is, I found it to be more of like a story kind of book versus, oh, hi Bassy, let me get you on here. Okay. Anything like that. But Bassy is actually the one who recommended this book to me. So I appreciated that because I always like getting a suggestion, and yeah, it was really interesting. So welcome, Bassy. Great to be
Hi.
here. A long-awaited conversation.
I know. I was just listening to what you were saying, and my favorite genre is memoirs that have a self-help element to it because you
Okay.
feel like you're reading the person's story and you get to learn from the person's story, but you also have the data and the real like clinical, I would say, picture in the background to make sure that we're not
Mhm.
just telling our own narrative with, a lens that may not be so developed. Like I find the development of those types of memoirs to be really special. Like maybe you should talk to someone. I would put under that category. Um, the
Group.
choice group, the choice. Though that's my genre. Like that is my jam.
Okay. Okay.
And when I heard about Shadow Daughter, so for this discussion, I actually read it for the third time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really special book in my world, and I'm really excited for this discussion today.
Okay. So if I have to be honest, when I started it, my impression was like, I don't know, I didn't like it. I was like, she's being a little complaining. Like I wasn't getting so into it. And then as the book continued, I was like, oh, okay, she does have chapters on like forgiveness and growth and things like that, which I didn't see so much at the beginning. So at the beginning, I was a little bit like more hesitant. Yeah, but I want to hear like what is it that you like this book so much that you want us to like talk about it and that you read it for the third time? Like what stood out to
Yeah.
you
So I
here?
think it's the piece about how we we don't know that there's like a world that really exists around this. Like I think she gives a tiny bit of infrastructure to a world that has zero infrastructure. I think especially now, like I know the whole Oprah thing happened and it's a hot topic, estrangement, and the mother-daughter estrangement is even more niche. And I just loved finding a piece that I think was written with a lot of intention. I think she does share a lot of the perspective of the other side for just the idea, she says in like towards the end, estrangement is not the solution, it's a tool. And the closer we can get to the solution, the better of a chance we have at there being some sort of growth on this topic. But I know we're so far from that. And her book feels like one of very few that actually address it, I think, in an appropriate way. So that felt just very comforting for anyone who finds themselves feeling like they need to distance themselves from a parent or a close loved one. What do we do, and she kind of gives a little tiny framework for that, and I thought that was really unique.
Hmm. What would you say her framework? Like, what did you take? What was your takeaway? What was the framework that you noticed in the book?
The framework is that most people who find themselves estranging from, let's just use the parent as the example, have a lot of back and forth before that decision is made, and go back a lot of times and try over and over again different things, think this time is going to be different. She talks about when her daughter was dying of an eating disorder and her mom reached out to offer her help. And she believed this time is going to be different, only for that to be her mom's in, to go right back in to the same pattern. And maybe looking at other people's patterns and seeing that this isn't, you know, so unique. My case is not so unique. Her case is not so unique. It's this is the story. This is what happens. And there's kind of like a pattern. There's kind of like it's trackable. And if it's trackable, then what does that mean for all the judgment and all the shame that those who are trying to navigate this put on themselves? I'm the problem, especially with a parent who
Right.
says you're the problem?
Right. It's so interesting that you're saying that because I actually had the book is open to 175, and at the bottom of page 175, there was something that stood out to me that really aligns with what you're saying. Her aunt, she wrote, my aunt wondered out loud what it must have been like to grow up with a mother like that, right? The giving, not really able to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And she said, for once, I didn't carefully consider my response or censor myself. I can tell you what it was like, I said. It makes you into a person who never feels good enough, smart enough, kind enough, pretty enough, who lies awake at 2 a.m. feeling ugly and worthless, then gets up in the morning and carries on. And she says how suddenly, like, just saying that, like, she just felt like light because there's so much grief that's associated with this. And that comes up also, like, as you're saying, like, when people are, like, you don't know what to do, like, you're going through this kind of pain, but it is also like extremely exceptionally painful to separate from a parent. And I do a lot of work with like people who are experiencing grief from loss, and sometimes I think it's hard to understand the grief of estrangement, how there's similarity in the grief, but there's also a big difference because it almost could be looked at like a choice. It's almost like thinking of a widow or a divorcee, right? People tend to judge them differently. They look at them differently because they feel like, well, one of them, you had a choice, but like, it's not really a choice. To those who go through it, they know it's not really a choice.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when you said sometimes people don't understand, my mind popped up to like no one who's not in the situation can understand. Like I haven't yet to come across an ally for someone who is actively cut off from a close family member who has not dabbled in this topic in some way. I think that the world is like really just like, yeah, there's death, there's illness, there's poverty, and you're choosing this. Choose good, choose connection. But I don't think they see the pattern. So I feel like, she really lays out the pattern of like, you're not choosing connection. In fact, you're choosing connection. She says where connection's not there. It's not, it's not there. You can
Yeah,
choose this person over and over again, but they are not choosing you.
yeah. And that I think is I want to say it's the secret to like what the solution is. But I want to ask you first, like, what do you feel like is, I mean, we're kind of jumping. I feel like we're
Oh,
jumping to
what's
the
the
end,
secret? What are you
but it's
saying?
fine.
What's the
What's the
secret?
secret? I think the secret lies in the emotional connection. Like, I understand that parents don't always know how to connect emotionally. Like, yeah, if they didn't receive that from their parents, right? If we go back, the inherited trauma, all that, people don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's the parent's responsibility to learn how. There are so many resources out there today. I don't think you can say any longer, but like how, where, who should I ask? I mean, go on the internet, ask your local rabbi or, clergy member and there's so many ways of being able to access. There's referral agencies. There are ways of being able to find help. And I do think that it is incumbent on the parent, just because in the parent-child dynamic, the parent is always in that position of having a little more, if you want to call it power, there's something
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So I think I would say that's like number one. Her chapter 8 is all about forgiveness. And I think that's like the other side of the coin is for a person to be able to recognize that their parent has the human element also. I do think that it's important for adult children to keep that in mind.
Yeah, adult children who can really have already learned to take care of themselves is my
Yeah.
caveat there,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is the barrier to learning to take care of myself. Like, wow, I've seen what my parent has gone through, and I know they're fraught with pain. How could I be another part of their painful journey? Right? Versus what you're saying, which I 100% agree with, and I love that, to know there's someone out there who really believes this, like the the child was never a part of the parent's emotional regulation journey to start with. They should never have been involved because that power imbalance, the child cannot do anything. There's no autonomy, there's no agency in that power imbalance. And in our practice, we get a lot of, you know, people who are just trying to, for the first time, like understand what is going wrong in their relationship with their parent, or sometimes a sibling. And I'll just say about the parents, like that line is non-negotiable for me. They're in the parent-child relationship, the parent is always responsible to take accountability for the emotional state of the relationship. The child is not capable. Now, when you talk about adulthood, that is a jump because, again, adult children who were raised by these parents are stuck in a very childlike state of dependency, which is so valid and makes so much sense. And our goal as therapists is to gently guide them towards that independence, right? Once there's enough safety and independence, then we could say to them, can you see that you were never the problem because your parent came into your life with this struggle and they only just projected onto you. I say you're a casualty in someone else's war. And
That's a great way of looking at it. Right.
and to process that, I think just takes an enormous amount of strength that no child should ever have to have. So I find that to be a little complicated too, that piece. But of course, that acceptance also comes with freedom. And she talks, right, in forgiveness, and she talks about that there was a stage where she just stopped looking for the answers. And I want everyone who's watching this to know that, like, that doesn't just happen. Like, you don't just make it happen. And you don't know when it's going to come, but we do know that when we address the inner turmoil and when we create space for it, the tolerance for it builds. And that is the only way to have the chance at it happening. And
Right. Yeah. I just would add to that, and it doesn't mean that the relationship will ever look like what they wish it would, right? Like you can't make somebody into somebody that they're not.
no,
If a
it's
parent is
totally for
not
yourself.
capable, yeah.
It's completely for you and whoever's in your new family system, your next generation family system, to have a chance at safe, secure connection.
Hmm.
Um, and that I just being and doing the work that I do, I don't know how much this comes across your desk, but feels like one of the biggest curses of this generation that all these, adult children are walking around feeling like I'm supposed to do better for the future. I want better for the future. I don't want anyone to ever feel that way about me the way I feel about my parent. Yet
Hmm.
the amount of work and inner development it takes to be able to withstand facing the fact that your parent didn't choose you is it's not human. I don't think that it should ever be expected that a human should do that, but that's the challenge. That's what we're looking for so that these
Yeah.
adults can move forward and build cycle break, big word, but like build out a new reality from here. Like that is massive work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's facing and managing the grief, essentially,
Oh yeah.
that comes up. Yeah.
Yeah. But also not just the grief, the rejection, the
Right.
the demeaning element
Right.
of it, the emotional, you know, turmoil that comes with working with someone so intimately like this. It's like
Yeah.
handing someone their only meal is food they're allergic to. So what are they supposed to do? Right? The conflict doesn't go
So
away.
right. So, on that note, I want to ask you, what did you think about, like, when you read about her mother's pain, like when her father described to her that her mother had like so much pain and like her mother would have these like intense reactions right at the end of the book. Her father when her mother died, her father kind of distanced himself a little bit too. And he was like, I can't, like, he had to make sense of what would his relationship now look like with her because he loved his wife and essentially the author caused her mother pain in her own way. Her mother caused her pain, but she also caused her mother pain. So I'm curious, what's your take on that?
It sucks. It really sucks. That's all I mean, we know, in couple systems, we know that a guy like him would be attracted to a wife like her, right? Someone who's powerful, who takes ownership, who dominates. And he wanted that in his life for his own reason. And
Subconsciously, you could argue.
like, yes, I don't think he knows about it. And Harriet was taking him away from that desire. If he
Mm.
faced the fact that Harriet wasn't the problem, then he also, meaning often you find the spouse to also not be one to take accountability. Now, her mom didn't take accountability and was vicious and was volatile, right? So there's just a whole element of neglect and toxicity and dysfunction in that. But often you do have a partner of someone like that who is dysfunctional but appears to be the easy one,
Mm-hmm.
who's
Right.
not stirring the pot, but also really loves that the pot is dysfunctional because it doesn't require them to take ownership of their wounded parts that they can't face. We see it a lot. So if he would admit,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, if he would admit that Harriet and, the other kid, the daughter, she only had one sister, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that the other daughter, they were not the problem. He would have to look into, why was I so attracted to a mother who couldn't protect her babies? Why did I let that go on for so long? He's
Right.
not looking into that.
He's not looking into that, but I think that's an easier answer in a way that like he's faced with a choice of his marriage. If he would have said something to her, meaning that's the deeper question is why was he attracted to her? Once he's in a marriage with her, essentially it was either there's like, domestic issues, or he kind of takes a step away and doesn't address it, and then there's issues between him and his child. So he chose his marriage over his child, which
Mhm.
isn't uncommon. I think that's probably more common than not.
But he chose the
She's very
marriage over
patient.
his child because he was more scared of his wife. She was volatile to him
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
He wasn't in the power imbalance. So for him, it's a lot safer. Yes, it's so painful to be living with a partner who, again, makes you a casualty in their own war. Like, mom had an internal battle that was so deep and so existential for her. But he was made a casualty, but he can go out on his own. He can make his own money. He can drive his own car. It wasn't
Different than daughter, for sure. Yeah.
exactly, it wasn't as
Yeah.
threatening to his survival the way it is for daughter. So he
Oh,
essentially
for sure.
made a choice, a subconscious choice, like, this is good enough. But it was maybe good enough for a marriage. It was definitely not good enough when there's a power imbalance. It was
Right.
dangerous.
Right. Right. It's a very interesting dynamic. The reason I think I said before it's interesting that you're bringing this up. Last month I discussed emotional inheritance, and also we talked about this idea of sometimes the quieter parent is we like the child tends to look away from that parent and not really put any responsibility or blame on them. And sometimes they have to, like for survival. Like at least she felt like she had one good parent, and then at a certain point in time, maybe when they get older, they're like, wait, but why didn't that parent stand up for me actually? Like
Exactly.
all of a sudden
Yeah.
they're realizing like yeah, it was nice to have that stable, person, but and all of a sudden there's question marks over there, which I think is really interesting.
Because that speaks to how severe the imbalance is. If you are a kid and your view of marriage or dependency is what you see in the movies and what you see in your own
Mhm.
home, you are looking at, okay, the movies, that's fantasy. And then there's what's happening in your own home. There's the good cop and the bad cop. So if dad is the good cop, then he must be fine. But then what happens is then we get older and we start, our minds develop, our prefrontal cortex does its thing, and we start to get more perceptive and we say, 1 second, dad was better than mom, but why didn't he come to bat for me? What was that? And then I think it starts to seep in, but still, this is your only front row seat to a relationship. So you're going to need a lot of time and a lot of
Mhm.
experience with other
Mhm.
relationships. And that's one thing that's really beautiful about therapy. Therapy is also a relationship where there's power
Mhm.
imbalance between the therapist and the client. And to see that your therapist can treat you with the utmost respect and with those boundaries that embody love and respect and protection, you might say, 1 second, this is what it looks like. That seemed good enough. But now that I see, I find
Yeah.
kids who grow up in dysfunctional homes have a lot of layers to peel away. Like, oh, I thought
Mm.
this was real life, and then I realized that was a protection. Or I thought this was real life, I realized that was a mask. I thought this was real life, and I realized that was a very low standard that was developed by my perception of what I experienced as a child. I thought, and then they'll have bosses who aren't of that quality. They'll have partners, they'll date people who aren't of that quality. Sometimes people marry people of that quality and level up, and their partner doesn't want to level up. Friends, it's a constant, I would say, recycling until
Mm.
you find a place where you feel that inner alignment and that inner peace that says, if I screw up in this relationship, I will not be unsafe. Then you're like, okay, 1 second, we can calm down now. And a lot of people don't experience those relationships until they get to therapy or happen upon one and are able to maintain it even without the framework, even without the blueprint for it.
Yeah. And with all that, I'm still curious to go back to the question of what was it like for you when you read about like her mother's like pain? Like how did you
Oh, I forgot about
take
the
that in?
question.
How did it hit you?
Um, I think a different version of myself would have been activated by it. Like, I don't care about the
Mm.
mom's pain. She has no right to do this to her child. Um, this version of me would answer you that the pain is really valid, and I have a lot of empathy for mom. And I also stand that the world needs to be accountable, because if we are not holding mom accountable, we're not holding their daughter accountable, and then we're not holding their daughter accountable, and we're not holding their daughter accountable. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a world that's so um, filled with, you know, this criminal behavior,
Mm.
this non, this non justifiable criminal. Like, it's not even like it's held up anywhere. You can just do it.
Mm.
Um, and you know, I'm thinking as we're talking, a mother who tells her daughter she needs to lose 15 pounds and she's fat, like, would probably, if CPS was called on that mother, probably nothing would happen.
Right.
Child is
Right.
fed, shelter,
Yeah.
house looks good. So I hate that we live in a world like that. So there's no justice for that kind of criminal behavior except for those of us who know it more intimately and can say, wait, this is unacceptable. And mom was the adult. Mom had to say, I don't want to live like this. I don't want my
Mm.
kids to live like this. And I understand that generation was different than the world we live in now. We have to hold her accountable.
Yeah, and it's tough because sometimes we're talking about a parent who emotionally doesn't have the maturity to be accountable. And that's where a lot of the pain comes in. And I think that's where a lot of the estrangement happens because if a parent is able, they're emotionally mature enough to learn, to grow, to apologize, to do better, to really start showing up, even if it's later in life. A parent can do this when they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Like a child is forever waiting for that change, right? So a parent could do that anytime. But the real pain happens when there's a parent who's not emotionally mature. They're never going to own up to it. They're never going to face that. They're never going to repair that. And that's when there's estrangement. And that's where there's tremendous amount of hurt and all the
Totally.
feelings.
And to answer your question quickly, like, when she was on her deathbed,
Mm-hmm.
did she backpedal any of it? Did she realize, like, even at the end, I just want you to know that I wish I could have loved you the way you deserved? No, she couldn't even do that, which shows
Mm-hmm.
you how filled with just deep, like, existential wounding that she could
Mm-hmm.
not even let go of for any circumstance.
Yeah.
Um, but I want to comment something else that I think will be applicable to the audience is I do I'm scared to say this out loud. I do think it's okay for this generation to be filled with heavy boundaries and heavy estrangement because of it. Like,
Mm.
I'm okay with, there being a level of sacrificial offerings, I like to call it, people and situations that had to shatter so that the new crop can be rebuilt.
Mm.
It's
But people
terrible.
might like that, people might not like that.
I was about to disclaim it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's so
Yeah.
painful. I can't even do justice on Instagram to even address what I'm saying, how much I know it's filled with impossible pain and
Mhm.
unrectifiable pain. And I don't think we should salvage any of these things if it means we're not going to successfully recycle into a new crop.
Okay.
Depending on the
I think
case.
that's
It depends on the case.
right, right. I think that the one caveat, I mean, I'm sure there's more, and we could probably
There's
go
so
on
many
and on about that.
caveats. Yeah.
But one thing that's important for people to remember, because I don't want anyone to hear that and think like now they have carte blanche to like, start estranging from a parent. But I would say it's important to take into account the parent's capability and not necessarily do they have to cut off all ties, like just to kind of figure out,
Any
right? And that's why I think you're
boundaries.
saying it's
Yeah.
so nuanced. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Any boundaries. Because also I think what I'm saying is ask yourself this question. If I keep status quo in this relationship, if we keep things as is, what is the fallout? What will the consequences be? And weigh those potential consequences with needing to take space from this person, needing to create barriers and boundaries with this person, and then think through, okay, I could have a happy family right now. I could have, or the picture of a happy family right now, right? It's not actually what it'll look like. Or I can keep things status quo. I can maintain that comfort right now, but I lose the ability to regenerate a more wholesome connection in the future. Versus it's impossible to set limits with this relationship right now, and it's so painful, but it might be the only way to get healthy internally and to restructure the pattern of these relationships so that there's potential for true connection and true alignment in the future. And that's, I guess, really my point.
Okay. Would that be like, I guess one of the biggest takeaways, like as we wrap up for today, like what was the most, let's say, validating aspect or maybe a surprising aspect of this book that like you took? Is it what you just said? Would you add on?
I think that she gives she gives people with no framework, with no world to put all of these feelings and all of this turmoil that exists internally. She gives us a place to put it.
Mm.
Like, you belong to this community. She lists the names. I loved when she listed the names the first time I read it. I'm like, and him from Utah too? Like, it just, everyone. I was like, it's everywhere. It's everyone. I live in New York. She was listing people who live in New York. I found that really moving. Like, there's so many different scenarios and different stories, and it gives you permission to honor your story the way these people have honored their story, and to know that your
Mhm.
story is not random. I just think that a lot of people who are going through this feel like, is this really toxic, or is my mom just in a bad mood? Is this really dysfunction? Or like, okay, so we didn't always have XYZ taken care of, but sometimes, like, I think we just don't know. We only know what we know. And the point of development is to give you a infrastructure, a foundation for life. And if you are
Mhm.
only experiencing that foundation, it's so easy to be like, is it fine enough? Okay. No one has it perfect, right? A lot of these parents say, yeah, I made mistakes. Same thing. Like, we're not just talking about imperfections and mistakes. And I think Shadow Daughter really gives you a place to start getting your wheels going. Well, that feels familiar and that feels familiar. And that really hurt that person, that case. Is it really hurting me too? Yeah, it is. Okay, do I now have permission to go think through that a little more? Yeah, I do.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. I like that idea of like giving yourself permission because I'm very big into like that sense of self peace. I think you need that to have healthy relationships. And people are very hesitant. Exactly what you said. Like, okay, we didn't always have, this or that. Like, okay, you don't have to hate on your parent either. Like, you're allowed.
Totally.
Let's put a stranger aside just for a second. You're allowed to feel your own pain and your own reality. You can say, I have a great mom. I love my mom. I don't want to have a bad relationship with her. Okay, so don't. But you're still allowed to give yourself permission and say, like, I do wish she would have shown up for me more emotionally. Like, she didn't seem to care so much about XYZ. Okay, like, could you just at least give yourself permission for that? Because it's going to enhance your
Yeah.
relationships. All of a sudden, you're going to expect, like, maybe a little more. Maybe you can give a little more. Maybe you're recognizing, I didn't get that, but I'd like to give that to my children or my spouse or my friends. So
Yeah.
there's so many elements, like on a grand scale, like the book is really talking about estrangement, but I just want to point out before we wrap up that even on a smaller scale, like noticing your own reality, which is what you're saying, like noticing your experiences, it's validating for yourself and it's also illuminating.
No, you're bringing up an excellent point. Like, this has been a very extremist conversation, but even between people who just have, we see it all, like just smaller ruptures with their parents or with people in their lives, with their spouses. It doesn't mean this extreme, of course. And it's really about you. And I think that's the answer. If you feel like you're actually at peace and regulated and not activated in your everyday life over whatever's happening in your interpersonal relationships, then yeah, you don't necessarily need to jump on this. If you feel like there might be room for that regulation, then there's probably room for more boundaries. If you think that you have zero or very little regulation, you're probably in a category of someone who doesn't even know how healthy relationships can look out there. And again, just to pitch, a lot of times we think of therapy as like a clinic, or you go to the doctor and you get healed and you get tools. Like, the therapy that I do, and Robin, I think you fall in this category also, the therapy that we do is not sterile clinical work. It's work that shows you what the model for your relationship should be.
Mm.
They should be
Very
collaborative.
relational. Yeah.
Exactly. Collaborative, non-judgmental, opening space up to talk about things without there needing to be a solution. And mostly the, alignment, the attunement that your therapist has with you is often the attunement that your parents should have had with you.
Mm.
And you're coming to therapy because you've been longing for that attunement your whole life. And my hope is for everyone watching this and everyone who we see come across our offices is that we can offer them that attunement in spurts so that they can go, you can go look for that in your everyday life and, hopefully find it once you find that resting space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here, Bassy. It was great talking about this
I know it wasn't long
book.
enough, Robin. It went so fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Till
And we
next
didn't get a
time.
lot of comments, but I know that I'm going to post it on my Instagram page and it will be up on YouTube. And anybody who writes any questions or thoughts in the comments, I know we'll be able to engage with you there. So hope
Of
to hear more from
course.
you.
Okay, looking
Oh,
forward. Thank you.
okay.
Bye.
Bye.